This is a recorded version. New questions can't be taken. If you want to ask the question to the panelist, please join the live session every Saturday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, New York Time, or 4:30 p.m. IST India Time.
महापंथ यह योग है, सहज श्वेत है धाम, तेज पुंज सत्पुरुष है, कह हंसन विश्राम।
VYGOS is Vihangam Yoga Global Online Satsang, which is scheduled every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Indian Standard Time. Those who would miss to attend the morning session can listen to the broadcast replay on Sunday evening at 4:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. The aim of this forum is to give the entire world an opportunity to learn the ancient science of meditation and benefit from this pious service inspired by Sadguru Sadafal Dev Ji Maharaj, the pioneer of Vihangam Yoga. If you are interested in learning the technique or want to conduct a program at your place, and for any inquiry related to it, please feel free to write to us at info@vihangamyog.org. That is info@vihangamyoga.org.
Jai Sudev, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Vihangam Yoga Global Online Satsang. I myself am Avinav, joining from Australia, and I welcome you to another week where today we speak again and dive further into the topic of the mystery of death. For those of you joining for the first time, welcome. For those of you who have returned once more, we thank you for your ongoing support. This platform is one which is for all of you wonderful listeners, and we hope that today, equipped with our global panel, we can give you something thought-provoking and something which you can go back to your lives with. Today, as I mentioned, we'll be talking about death, and I would be inaccurate if before I started, I first said, we all here know that death is a very sensitive topic. It's something which each of us have different levels of understanding of, different levels of experience of, and death can mean different things to different people. To some, it is an ending. To some, it is the beginning of something anew. However, no matter who you are, the impacts of death is something which each of us have felt, which each of us have felt sad about, have cried over, have had difficult experiences with. And so as we begin, I'd like to mention that we here are all very empathetic towards these feelings and this sense of what death really means. And as we go through today, I'll be joined by Vijay Ji from the US, and we'll be trying to share a conversation on what death really is and what it means in the context of Vihangam Yoga and spiritual philosophy at large. If at any point each of you listeners feel that the conversation we're sharing is perhaps inaccurate, perhaps uncomfortable, please do raise it to us. We'll try our very best to make sure that this is a productive conversation and one which you can all benefit from. So today we'll be taking a bit of a different kind of format, and we'll be starting with our prayers, going towards the Swarved, a wonderful bhajan, and then as I mentioned, we'll be having an extended Q&A session with Vijay Ji from the US. And of course, closing towards the end. So our ask today is for you all to kind of engage with us if you can. We'd really love to hear what you are all thinking about in the context of today's topic. And of course, even if there are things which perhaps you're not thinking of yet and which come up as we go, please do feel free to add anything which you're thinking about or you'd like for us to talk about more to our WhatsApp number, which is on the screen now, or even, slido.com/VYGOS. We currently have about 5 or 6 questions which we'll be trying to navigate through today in our conversation. But of course, as more and more come up, we'll try our best to address them as we go. So before we begin our journey, let's stop for the welcoming prayers, the Swagat and Mangal Gan, which are offered in the feet of the Master of Vihangam Yoga. Let's invoke his blessings on this auspicious occasion and then proceed toward the Svaraved.
आज स्वागत नित्य गुरुवर संत शुभागम आइए, अध्यात्म विद्या दिव्य ज्योति सोमरस बरसाइए। दोष दुर्गुण दूर करके शुद्ध हंस बनाइए, भेद गम गति ज्ञान गर्जन शक्ति द्वार हटाइए। खुले द्वारा शब्द सागर भक्त जन अनहवाइए, जन सदा फल विश्व शिक्षक शान आन बचाइए, शान आन बचाइए। विश्व शांति नाम मंगल परम गुरु को ध्याइए, वर्ग द्वंद्व शांति दूर कर भाव भेद मिटाइए। सार्वभौम समष्टि सत्ता त्यात्मराज बनाइए, वेश भाषा भाव जगमय ज्ञान पर दर्शाइए। समृद्धि सुख शांति धरातल स्वर्ग भूमि बनाइए, विश्व शिक्षक जन सदा फल नीति स्वर अपनाइए, नीति स्वर अपनाइए।
Thank you for that wonderful composition. As always, with the blessings of the Master, we're now equipped to move towards the next part of our session. The next part is the Svarved, wherein we begin our reflections on this topic with the recitation of verses composed by the Master of Vihangam Yoga, Sadguru Sadafal Dev Ji Maharaj. The Svarved is a distillation of the complete knowledge of spirituality which he acquired in his own experiences as he proceeded on the journey. As such, it's extremely important to us that we begin our journey hearing from him first, hearing from his nectarine wisdom, and then furthering our reflections as we go further today. I'd now like to hand over to Kushbuji from India to take us through some verses, after which we'll dive into our conversation for today.
Jai Sadgurudev. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. It's an honor to be part of the session today. Here are select verses from the Svarved, the Encyclopedia of Spiritual Secrets, authored by Sadguru Sadafal Dev Ji Maharaj. Man maya marti nahi, nahi vasana nash, yah sharir mari mari gaya, kar maya man nash. Material temptations do not die in the man or mind, nor even in the chitta or inner memory. Material cravings end only when the mind dies, and that is, its deception of the soul stops. As long as the mind is the master, the soul remains associated with the world, its bondages, and with the sufferings of life and death. The body has died several times, but the mind has not. and so the suffering does not end. Therefore, the detachment of the mind from the soul, that is, the death of the mind, is essential for the end of Maya, the delusion that worldly subjects are the source of happiness. All living beings are prey to the confusion and restlessness of the mind. Stopping the wavering of mind is more difficult than stopping the waves of the ocean. Under the influence of the wavering mind, great hermits and scholars could not escape the pull of materialism. The soul does not do anything for its own true bliss, but is busy in satisfying all the worldly cravings of the mind. The mind leaves its nature of worldly cravings and starts working for the soul when the soul attains the experience of the consciousness by the technique of Vihangam Yoga. As one advances further in Vihangam Yoga meditation, the mind detaches from the soul and the soul starts to experience the pure eternal bliss of supreme consciousness, and it keeps the mind under its control. When a yogi wins over the restlessness of the mind, all sufferings, sorrow, and troubles end for his or her soul. Only in the absence of the mind, a form of Maya, will living beings cross the deep ocean of worldly bondages and obtain supremely blissful salvation. The enlightened saints have, therefore, preached to kill the mind and win over it. बिना ज्ञान वैराग्य के प्रभु से मिलन न होय, जग बंधन छूटे नहीं, जन्म मरण दुख होय. The Lord is attained when the quest of the soul imbibed with true knowledge and detachment from the mind is completed. This realization happens through true bhakti, which happens on plane of the soul and not of the mind. There is no freedom from the bonds of the world without true knowledge and detachment, which is why one begets birth, death, and rebirth, and all the afflictions that go with it. The uncoupling of the objects of the world and the desires thereof happens only through Jnana and Vairagya. Those desirous of spiritualization, therefore, should proceed on its path by taking recourse to true knowledge and detachment. लीला अद्भुत अगम है, अनुभव गमन अगाध, साहस बल सद गुरु दया, महाप्रलय कोई साध. The experience of Vihangam Yoga Samadhi is astonishing, unfathomable, and attainable through experience with the grace of the Sadguru. Those yogis who have conquered death through their mighty endeavor and the grace of the Sadguru remain in the state of Vihangam Yoga Samadhi till Mahapralay. Thank you. Jai Sadgurudev.
Thank you very much, Kushbuji, for sharing those verses with us. A lot of very interesting concepts were raised just now, including Vairagya, the definition of the process of killing the mind, and the process of removing ourselves from Maya, all of which are things which we also heard about in our previous session last week, which was delivered by Dr. Subhash Chandra Ji. So I'd also encourage listeners who haven't had the chance to kind of dive into this concept earlier with us, please do have a listen of the previous week's session as well. That may give you a bit more context into where some of the questions we're addressing today come from. So without further ado, I'd now like to introduce, okay, so before I introduce Vijay Ji, let's first go towards a bhajan from Rekha Ji in the US. And then as we're all thinking through these concepts and ideas which we're hearing about, let's finally go towards Vijay Ji and have our conversation for the day. So I'd like to firstly welcome Rekha Ji to share a bhajan with us. And after that, we'll proceed towards having a conversation with Vijay Ji.
Thank you, Abhinav Ji, and Jai Sadgurudev, everybody. Today's bhajan is the proclamation of Lord Sadguru Sadakal Dev Ji Maharaj. Sadgurudev says, I will make you pure and will help you meet the Supreme Soul. I will help you to come out of the cycle of birth and death. Dear friends, who on this planet has made such kind of proclamation? So let's hear the bhajan. Adbhut marg योग विहंगम मैं तुमको बतलाऊंगा अद्भुत मार्ग योग विहंगम मैं तुमको बतलाऊंगा यदि विधिवत तुम साधन करी हो यदि विधिवत तुम साधन करी हो अमर लोक पहुँचाऊंगा अद्भुत मार्ग प्रकृति आधार तो हे छोड़वाओ निज स्वरूप ठहराऊंगा सुरती उलटी के गगन चढ़ाऊं सुरती उलटी के गगन चढ़ाऊं डोरी मकर धराऊंगा अद्भुत मार्ग पिंड ब्रह्मांड शून्य ज्वार शठ ताव पर बैठाऊंगा अनुभव दर्शे मोती बरसे अनुभव दर्शे मोती बरसे अमिया नद्यान हवाऊंगा अद्भुत मार्ग शुद्ध रूप तो ही हंस बनाऊं परम पुरुष दिखलाऊंगा वहाँ की दृश्य कौन में वर्णो वहाँ की दृश्य कौन में वर्णो वाणी बुद्धि न पाऊंगा अद्भुत मार्ग महाप्रभु अनंत दया में उनसे तो ही मिलाऊंगा कहीं सदा फल कहीं सदा फल कहीं सदा फल परमानंदा आव अद्भुत मार्ग योग विहंगम मैं तुमको बतलाऊंगा अद्भुत मार्ग बोलिए सद्गुरु देव की जय Over to you, Abhinav ji.
Much thanks, Rekha Ji, for that beautiful bhajan. This bhajan, as Rekha Ji mentioned, really encapsulates the journey of a disciple with a master in Vihangam Yoga. And if you're interested in understanding this bhajan further, we do actually have an English translation available if you would be curious in understanding it word by word as well. Rekha Ji already very beautifully explained it, but please do feel free to reach out to us and we can point you towards a link or resources which will give you a more, let's say, deep dive into exactly what each verse in this bhajan represents. So thank you, Rekha Ji, for that wonderful explanation as well as that wonderful presentation. So now I'd like to introduce Vijay Ji. Vijay Ji is currently serving as the president of the North American Institute of Vihangam Yoga. He has a plethora of experience in talking about different concepts of Vihangam Yoga. And he joined us last week after Dr. Subhash Chandra's explanation on the concept of death from the multiple outlooks which he presented. And he helped some of us listeners kind of navigate some of the questions we had about this concept and this topic. So we figured that this week, as you wonderful listeners have a bunch of questions which you wanted to talk through, navigate through with us, we figured let's just have a longer conversation today, more kind of centralized on the things which you're curious about. So I'd like to firstly welcome Vijay Ji. I hope you can hear me.
It's pleasure, Abhinav Ji. Pretty much audible.
Yeah, awesome. So thanks for joining us today. So Vijay Ji, I've been looking through the questions which we have in Slido, and that's actually a good point to remind all of you listeners. As we're talking through these things, we have two avenues available. Slido.com/VIJOS, which is on your screen now, and a WhatsApp number, which is coming on your screen as well. Please feel free to drop any questions, thoughts, concerns in there, and we'll navigate through them today. So Vijay Ji, I've been looking through these questions, and a lot of these are really fantastic, thought-provoking points. And one of the things which I'm seeing which is very kind of reasonable, even looking back to when I first started thinking about these concepts, is sort of what happens before and after death. Because as I understand it thus far, there's kind of 3 points of existence, if you could call it. There's what happens before our current state of existence and consciousness. Then there's what happens in the present, where we live a life. And then there's also what happens afterward, which we are, which is unknown to us in terms of experience. So, sort of, I'd love to hear from you and understand better, what is firstly the nature of existence per Vihangam Yoga, per spiritual philosophy? Because I think perhaps that will help us understand, if we can understand the nature of existence, like what is actually existing, perhaps say in the body, then perhaps we can better understand what happens to existence before and after our life. So the first question I put to you is, what is the nature of existence per spiritual philosophy? We've talked about it a few times. Maybe just if we could just kind of recap that for all of our listeners.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, this is something related to who we truly are. Are we this body? Are we the eyes? Are we the nose? Or somebody living inside? So the question that Abhinavji you're asking, most likely this is leading us to understand who the entity I am inside the body and what am I made of. You know, Sadhguru Sadafal Devji Maharaj in Swarved has described this in very great detail about how a soul, a spirit, which is a pure conscious entity, has happened to fall into this gross body that we experience today. So in the process of, you know, a fall of consciousness from being purely conscious entity to acquiring this body, which you see in front of the mirror, Sadhguru describes that it actually happens to go through 6 different layers of the body before you get or before you reach to what you are today, with what you see in front of your mirror. What you see in front of your mirror is the gross body. But prior to gross body, we acquire the subtle body, which is made of 19 elements. Prior to subtle body, we attain the Karan Deha. The Karan Deha, before Karan Deha, we attain Mahakaran Deha. Prior to Mahakaran is Kaivalya, and prior to Kaivalya is the purest self that we are, which has no impression of any ignorance and has no impression of any matter which you see in this creation. That means we are free from ignorance and we are free from matter. We are an entity which is made of pure consciousness. That's what we truly are. But today, this pure consciousness is tied up to the material nature and is strongly bound to this body, which is made of the matter. And the body which is transient. And it is so much tied to this transient body that we feel that we are transient. We are born as a child, and then we are aging and we are getting old and we are dying. This very impression that we are carrying within us shows how much tied up we are with this transient body. But the fact of the matter is, we are not the body. We are an eternal pure consciousness, if that's what we wanted to understand here. Over to you.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's fantastic. And it definitely aligns with sort of the journey that, you know, we all go through as we try to understand these concepts better. And actually, just to explore it a little further, I have also heard some very thought-provoking ways of thinking about these different bodies we go through, which is that we sort of leave something behind at each of these different bodies, right? So from my very rough understanding, the topology of our existence, as you very rightfully explained, Vijay Ji, includes the soul, includes the body, and then everything in between, including our brain, our different life forces, the different, internal organs of the body. And one of the most thought-provoking ways that I've come across, kind of thinking through our progression through these different bodies, is that we leave behind certain things at each of these points. And when we reach this most pure point, all that's left is the soul. And that's when we really kind of come upon what you've just mentioned, who we truly are. Would you agree that that is a kind of an accurate way of looking at it?
Yes, absolutely, Abhinavji. And one more interesting thing that maybe everybody will like to hear is, you in this normal life itself, every living being have got the experience of 3 bodies. The gross body, which is called the sthul deha. When you are in awakened state, what you experience about your body, this is what is the sthul deha. But when you go into dreaming state, at that point, what you experience about yourself is nothing but sukshma deha. That is what is the subtle body. So the dreaming state is an experience of the subtle body. And what is the experience of the karan deha, the one before? When you go into deep sleep. The state of deep sleep is reaching into the state of Karandeha. So our consciousness leaves or isolates from the sthul deha and the sukshma deha and reaches to the level of Karandeha. And that's when we go into deep sleep. So in day-to-day life, everybody has experienced all these three layers of the body. In awakened state, the gross body; in dreaming state, the subtle body, the sukshma deha; and in deep sleep, though you do not experience anything, but basically that no experience state is nothing but the state of Karandeha. What we fail to experience is the other layers of the body, which is like Kaivalya and Mahakaran, first Mahakaran, then Kaivalya, and then ultimately the Apta Deha. And that's what differentiates a yogi from a normal human being, because it is yogi who is capable to experience even those states of the body.
Yeah, that's an amazing way of thinking about it as well, and an amazing explanation as well. And I think like it's really interesting because when we talk about different forms of body, then at first when I came across this, I thought, am I transforming into something, or what's going to happen? But as you've rightfully explained, it's a very subtle kind of progression, right? Like it's the kind of the economy here, or the layer at which things are happening is the subtlety of consciousness itself. And I think that example you just gave is something which is very profound, of going through these three states even when we're asleep. And to kind of take this further, we talked about the soul and how that is how we understand what we understand to be our true self. So this is a great tie-in into some of the questions we have, which is what happens before and after death? And perhaps to get there, let's first maybe talk about what happens at the point of death. So when a person does, enter a state of death, then how would you explain what's actually happening in terms of the topology which we've kind of looked at just now? The soul, the body, the mind, like what's actually happening?
Well, that's definitely a good thing to discuss here. There's a very interesting way that Sadhguru describes the death in Swarved. Sadhgurudev says very beautifully, I really like it. Sadhgurudev says, who is the enemy of the body? Who is the enemy of the body? The soul itself is the enemy of the body. That's what Sadhgurudev says. Soul is the enemy of the body. Though body is the friend of the soul, because through this body, the human body especially, the human body is a gift, and it is the friend for the soul, because through this human body, soul can enlighten itself. But the soul is the enemy of the body, any other form of the body as well, because the body is declared dead the day soul leaves the body behind. So the death is not only about the isolation of the soul from the body, but actually it is the isolation of the sukshma deha, the subtle body, from the gross body. What it means is, when the 19 elements that constitutes the subtle body, the sukshma deha, which are 5 pranas, the 10 indriyas, which are like 5 sensory organs and 5 organs of actions. The 10 indriyas, the 5 prana, 4 inner organs. These 19 elements is what is called the sukshma deha. So when this sukshma deha isolates from the gross body, that is when something like the state of death is attained in the body, or rather the body faces the death and starts, kind of deteriorating and transforming into the soil. So that is the end of the gross body. Now the interesting thing here is, we said 10 indriyas isolate from the gross body, but does it mean that the eyes will vanish, the ear will vanish? No. So there's an interesting thing here. Not only we have the gross eyes, the gross, the organs through which we sense 5 different subjects, but we have the subtle form of these indriyas as well. We have subtle form of sensory organs, we have subtle form of the organs of actions. And only when those subtle form of the organs associates with the gross form of this, the body organs, that is when these gross organs become functional. So what isolates from this gross body is the subtle form of indriyas. Because of this body, whole body becomes dead. So the gross eyes are there, but the eyes will stop working. Ears are there, ear will stop working because of the isolation of the subtle body from the gross body.
Yeah, so would you kind of agree that, we have almost like these inanimate, or maybe not inanimate, more like inert entities in our existence, in our topology, which become animate and become connected to their subtle counterparts when a soul is in the body. And when the soul, let's say, exits the body, that's when that disconnection happens and we kind of observe this state of being in death.
Yeah, to elaborate it further, I would say that when we say that the soul leaves the body, as we understood that soul never leaves the body alone for a normal human being. At the time of death, it is the 19 elements along with the soul that leaves the body.
Right.
But as you rightly said, the source of life in the body, in this gross body, was nothing but the consciousness of the soul. So ultimately it comes to that point itself, that eventually it is the consciousness of the soul that is responsible for the life, and when it dissociates from the body, that is when it is declared as dead.
Yeah, gotcha. And I guess this is where things get interesting, right? So, let's say, maybe not interesting is the right word, but this is where things get, let's say, even more particular. So, let's say, as an example, like I have reached this state where my 19 subtle entities and the engine of my body have left my body. So what happens then? We have a couple of questions about what actually happens to the soul after it leaves the body with the subtle counterparts. Yeah, like I'd love to understand that better as well.
Yes, absolutely. So what we lose, what we are today, when we are, let's say, in this gross body, we are having the complete impression of this gross body. At the same time, when we go into dreaming state, we have the impression of the subtle body. When we go in deep sleep, we are in the state of Karan Deha. So obviously, when you leave this body, this gross body, you still carry the impression of the other Prakritic body. The two other body, which is the Karan Deha and the Sukshma Deha, those are still the Prakritic body, the body made of matters. And so you carry the impression of that. At the same time, you also carry the impression of the gross body, even though you leave the gross body. But in that state, you lose all the wisdom. You lose all the wisdom at that point, and you stay like idle, having no intellect, or rather the functional intellect, having no wisdom to decipher anything. You are just like dumb and waiting for the next course of life to happen. So the state is a state of dumbness, I would say. and only with the impression of the body. You just feel your body. You feel your subtle body, you feel your current body, and you carry the impression of the gross body that you were in before. So with that impression, you're just idle there, without having any wisdom, without having any kind of enlightening ideas over there, because you're just dumb, just like animal, dumb animal. That's what Sadhguru describes. Yeah.
So, like, just to clarify there, like, obviously, when we say dumb, we kind of mean the absence of intellect.
Exactly. Sorry. Yeah, you're very right. Yes.
Yeah. No. Like, just to clarify. And yeah, like, so, in this kind of aimless and I guess confused, but you can't even say you're confused, right? Because you don't have a means by which to say there's something to be confused of. Like, where do we actually exist per se? Like, are we in Prakriti? Are we beyond Prakriti? Where are we in this idle state?
Yeah, wonderful question. So, Sant Pravarji, Sant Pravar Sri Vigyan Dev Ji Maharaj, has beautifully explained this very same question in very great detail, and we can find that in YouTube. He says that when the subtle body leaves the body, the gross body, it goes into the space, in this space within this creation itself. So, when you breathe in several thousands and lakhs of subtle body in your body. And when you breathe out, there are lakhs and lakhs of subtle body that you breathe out with your breath, because there are those subtle body which are just floating in this space. So when we die, we just go into the space, and then from there, the subtle body come into contact with the wind, then the fire, then the all the 5 different elements of the creation. It goes through that and finally reaches to the grains, and then the male or the father eats that grain, and so the soul reaches to the father's body, and through the sperm of the father it reaches to the mother's womb, and finally the next body starts forming around it. So the subtle body continues to move from one body to another body. It is only the gross body that changes. Everything else remains as is.
Right. And I guess since, as you've explained, like, since it doesn't have an identifying characteristic, it doesn't actually have an impact on any other body, because it's sort of aimless and doesn't have any properties per se.
And in another word, if we want to understand this, our consciousness is limited consciousness. And when you have limited consciousness, see, what is consciousness? Consciousness is something which exhibits the property of knowledge, desire, and has the power of action. But the amount of knowledge that it can carry depend on how much consciousness you have. So every individual soul is a limited consciousness. Because of being limited, it can uphold only a limited knowledge by itself, unless it connects to the unlimited consciousness. So when we are disconnected from any unlimited consciousness, at one point of time, we carry only limited knowledge. If I ask you right now, do you remember, 11 days before, what is the food that you ate? It is not there in your consciousness right now. You'll have to recall it. Maybe if you have noted down somewhere, then, that memory will again rise up, and then only it will come into your consciousness. Right now, it is not in your consciousness. So at a time, your consciousness does not carry the impression of what has happened in the previous life, because that is a far, in the past. So you have already forgotten all that the consciousness has already lost all those memories. So when you come into this life, when certain britis rise from your chitta, that is what triggers those memory, which could be from the past as well. But because in this life you do not connect those memories with what you have been around in the surrounding, so you do not understand what this dream I have. But that dream could be from the past life as well. You never know. But your consciousness does not have a connecting thread right now to decipher what it truly means. And that's where sometimes you understand things, sometimes you do not understand things.
Yeah, and kind of leaning into that, we had another class of questions which we can kind of explore maybe, which is, what, like we just kind of talked through the Vedic and the philosophy of Vijay Yoga in terms of, what happens when we leave the body, we enter the grains, and then by nature we then are born into a body again. Is that a process of luck? Like how does that actually happen? Do we like what is the process? Because this process of being in an idle state after we die, and then entering the state of rebirth into a new kind of gross body. What is the connecting process which takes us from idle to animated again?
Yeah, this is a wonderful question. If you look at any inert thing, for example, the body, gross body itself, do you think it is an accident that we are sitting on certain pose today, or tomorrow we happen to be at some other place? It cannot be an accident. It is by our own choice, right? The soul is the one that drives this body by its own desire, by its own power of action, by its own wisdom, by its own knowledge. So there is a governing entity for this body. Similarly, there must be a bigger governing consciousness, some energy that is making everything move in this entire creation, in this entire inert creation, I would say. Because anything which is happening within this inert creation, if anything is in motion, that means there must be some governing entity which is making that in motion, because the inert entity by itself cannot be active. So there is a grand design. Certainly there is a grand design. Certainly there are certain kind of science which is behind everything which is happening, and it is already set into those formula of design. So something like when you have a spongy bed, and if you jump onto that bed, it will bounce you back because it is designed that way. Similarly, there are certain design which is already made in this creation, and that design is based on the karma, the actions that we take. Based on that, our next future course of where the soul will head to is decided. So the body that we acquire is the result of our own sanskara, the temptations, the nature, the character that we have built up or we have carried forward from all previous life. So any future life is nothing but the result of the kind of life you have lived previously, the kind of thought, the kind of wisdom, the kind of knowledge you have built through all the previous life is what is going to reflect into your temptations, into your desires. And that's what drive you to the next course of life. So yes, it is our actions which is responsible for us to fall into certain path and finally reach to a certain mother's womb, because that's not an accident.
Yeah, it's an amazing process. And I sort of wonder, like, there's this question here which kind of ties into this, which is, if we have a wish, let's say, that hasn't been fulfilled, and we hold on to that wish very strongly, then is it that wish which drives us into the next kind of incarnation of ours? Because, we have a question here from Vijay Ji, I believe, which is, according to Hindu Dharma, the soul runs behind after death what it wishes at the deathbed. So how should I ensure my wish is what the yogi suggests to be at my deathbed? So I think it just ties into this whole conversation we're having.
Yes, absolutely. First of all, let's think this way. When you are in, let's say, utmost unsafe situation, when your, let's say, the mind or your brain is not that much functional at that point because of the fear or because of whatever other reason, at that point, unconsciously, the thing that will do is nothing but the reflection of what you have become so far through all the actions that you have done in the past. Because habit is something which is built by the repeated actions. The thought and the temptations are also not instant, but that is the result of what life we have lived so far. So at the last breath, what kind of thought will you have is certainly related to what kind of life, what kind of character you are or you have built so far in this life and in previous life. So everything governs you to have a last wish as well. You just cannot have last wish just by your, by that instant. At that moment, all your previous sanskaras, all your actions, everything will start running in your head. And then eventually, whatever you have, sticked onto in your life so far, that's what will actually prop up your last wish. It is not all of a sudden, for example, somebody who is not very spiritual in nature, somebody who has never lived a spiritual life, have never paid attention or found spirituality a very negligible thing, at the last breath, it is very unlikely that he will remember Sadguru, because he has never paid attention to Sadguru. He has never known about Sadguru. So it is very unlikely that at the last breath, he will all of a sudden remember Sadguru. No, that is not possible. He will remember what he has attached himself to in majority of his life.
Yeah, very reasonable as well, right? Like kind of where all the function of what we do definitely makes so much sense. And, as we kind of start to reach the end, there's a couple more questions I'd love to touch on, which are kind of to do with the difference in types of death. So we've got one which is to do with what is the difference between a timely death and an untimely death? And a last one, which is what is the difference between the death of a yogi versus the death of a common human?
Right. So timely death and untimely death.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of adhyatma, spirituality, when we get the body, prior to getting a body, there is a set of past actions which is called prarabdha. The prarabdha is what is formed first, and that prarabdha decides the destiny of the soul. So when certain prarabdha come together, then based on what kind of experience the soul has to go through, that decides what body it will get into so that it experiences those prarabdha. So prarabdha is what is formed first, then the body. Now, when you come into body, if you lived the life within the body by undergoing through all prarabdha, and you completed all the destinies that the prarabdha had made for you in this life, then any death after that is a timely death. But if you happen to meet certain accident, or you did suicide or something, I don't know for what reason, your soul happens to leave the body prior to acquiring all the experience of prarabdha, that is what is called untimely death.
Right. So it's all kind of connected to this pool of actions which we've accrued in our previous lifetimes.
Right.
Right. Okay. And sorry, go ahead.
Right. So, and then the second question was, what is the difference between the death of a yogi and the death of a normal human being? First of all, if it's a complete yogi, then there is no death for a yogi, because then yogi does not die. What yogi does, the reason I'm saying there is a difference between a yogi leaving the body and a person dying. There's a difference for the fact that we have 9 doors in the human body. If we talk about in terms of human being have 9 doors, which are very obvious: 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, 1 mouth, and 2 organs of excretions. So these 9 doors are open already, and the sukshma deha, the subtle body, comes out of one of these doors for the normal human being. But what does yogi do? Yogi is not forced out of this body through these 9 doors. Rather, yogi chooses himself to open the secret 10th door. So there's a secret 10th door which is situated inside Sushmana, at the exit of Sushmana, and the yogi himself or herself exit the body through the 10th door very consciously. He does it very consciously, knowing that I am leaving the body, experiencing every bit of it. So it always remains in awakened state in the process of leaving the body. Whereas when you talk about normal human being only suffers the process of death, because the death is a process in which you feel unbearable pain as well at the time when the breath starts separating from the gross body. It is something like the lacs of scorpion stinging onto every pores of your body. So it's a very painful state. That's why the life, coming into life and exiting the life, the birth and the death, these two are actually a very painful process. That is why yogi have always preached a normal human being that you must try hard to escape the cycle of life and death. They didn't talk about you escape this living life. He said the cycle of birth and death, because the birth is painful and the death is painful. Both are very painful process, and we must find a way to exit from this cycle of birth and death. So yogis leave the body by their own wish, but normal human beings leave the body not by their choice, but they are forced by something called yam vayu, and that process is very painful. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Vijay Ji, for joining us today. I think, at least for me, I have very much learned a lot from our conversation and really enjoyed it. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I really hope we can share more conversations in the near future.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Awesome. So with that, I'd like for us to go towards the end of our session for this week. So we'll first have the Shanti part, and then after that, a quick wrap up, and then we'll move towards the end of our session.
विराग त्याग की शांति हो, उदासीनता शांति, सेवा जित शिष्य शांति हो, सद्य शांति हो शांति। हे प्रभु शांति स्वरूप हो, शांति शांतिमय शांति, शांति शांति जन शांति हो, पूर्ण शांतिमय शांति। हे प्रभु शांति प्रदान कर, दूर हो सर्व अशांति, देव सदा फल शांति में, शांति शांति सुख शांति। हे प्रभु शांति प्रदान कर, दूर हो सर्व अशांति, देव सदा फल शांति में, शांति शांति सुख शांति।
with that, we now reach the end of this week's session of the Vihangam Yoga Global Online Satsang. And, it reminds you of this fantastic doha and quote, which I first came across a couple of years ago when I started on this path of Vihangam Yoga. It roughly goes, die before death to realize there is no death at all. And it really captures a lot of the things which we spoke about today in our global panel. Death is difficult, is painful, it changes one's life. And it brings an end to one life and it changes the lives of many around. But depending on the level of spiritual practice and consciousness we've reached, the process of death can be one which we choose, and it can be a process of connection with a higher source, or a process of, let's say, reconnection and absolute connection with a higher source, rather than a disconnection from the body which we have led our lives in. So I hope today's session has given us all something to think about, and I hope it's also given us an answer to some of the questions we've had about this very difficult but very special and interesting concept of death. So thank you for joining us this week, and we look forward to having you all again in the coming week. Jai Gurudev.